My name is Detective Robert Monk, and in my 18 years of service with the Tahoe Basin law enforcement, I had never encountered a case that would haunt me quite like the disappearance of the Morrison twins at Lake Tahoe. It was a pristine summer morning in July when the call came in about two missing 18-month-old children who had vanished from the sandy shores of Emerald Bay. The twins, Emma and Ethan Morrison, had been playing near the water's edge under their parents' supervision when something went terribly wrong. Their mother, Jessica Morrison, had turned away for what she claimed was only a few seconds to retrieve sunscreen from their beach bag. When she looked back, both children were gone, leaving behind only their small beach toys and a chilling silence. The only trace that remained was a single blue pacifier floating gently back toward shore, carried by the lake's gentle current. Something about that lone pacifier in the vast expanse of crystal-clear water sent shivers down my spine as I realized we were dealing with more than a simple case of wandering toddlers. The Morrison family had been visiting Lake Tahoe from their home in Sacramento, staying at a popular resort on the California side of the lake for what was meant to be a peaceful family vacation. David Morrison, the children's father, worked as an engineer for a tech company, while Jessica was a part-time nurse who had taken extended leave to care for the twins. According to their statements, they had arrived at Emerald Bay early that morning to avoid the crowds and give the children a chance to play in the shallow water near the beach. The family appeared to be experienced with water safety, bringing appropriate gear including life jackets, though the children had not been wearing them while playing in the sand. Witnesses at the scene described the Morrisons as attentive parents who had been actively engaging with their children throughout the morning. The beach area where they had set up their spot was relatively secluded, with only a few other families scattered along the shoreline. The water in that particular section was known to be shallow for quite a distance from shore, making it popular with families who had young children. The initial search and rescue operation began within minutes of the report, involving multiple agencies and volunteer groups familiar with Lake Tahoe's unique challenges and geography. The lake's crystal-clear waters, while beautiful, could be deceptive in terms of depth and underwater currents that might affect a search operation. Dive teams were deployed to search the immediate area where the children had last been seen, while search and rescue boats patrolled the shoreline looking for any additional clues. The single pacifier that had been recovered was sent immediately to our forensic lab for analysis, though we hoped it would not be the only evidence we would find. Ground teams searched the surrounding forest areas in case the children had wandered away from the beach, though their young age made this scenario less likely. The coordination between California and Nevada authorities was seamless, as cases involving Lake Tahoe often required cooperation across state lines. Every available resource was mobilized as the golden hours for finding missing children began ticking away. The community response was overwhelming, with volunteers arriving from across the region to assist in the search efforts. Jessica Morrison's account of the events leading up to the disappearance was consistent, but left many questions unanswered about what could have happened in such a brief moment. She described turning away to reach into their beach bag, which was positioned only a few feet behind where the children had been playing in the sand near the water's edge. According to her timeline, this action took no more than 15 to 20 seconds, during which she heard no unusual sounds or cries for help from the children. When she turned back around, both Emma and Ethan were simply gone, with no indication of where they might have headed or what had occurred during those crucial seconds. Her husband, David, had been approximately 50 yards down the beach, skipping stones and taking photographs of the scenic lake views. Jessica's emotional state was understandably fragmented, but she remained coherent enough to provide detailed descriptions of what the children had been wearing and their behavior patterns. The fact that no one had heard any distress calls or unusual noises made the situation even more perplexing. Other beachgoers in the area confirmed that they had not noticed anything unusual until they heard Jessica's frantic calls for help. The forensic analysis of the pacifier provided limited but important information about the circumstances of the twins' disappearance. The item belonged to Emma, according to her parents' identification, and showed no signs of damage or struggle that might indicate what had happened to the child. Water damage patterns suggested it had been in the lake for a relatively short period, consistent with the timeline provided by the family. However, the current patterns in that section of Emerald Bay meant that the pacifier could have traveled a considerable distance from where it originally entered the water. Lake conditions that morning had been calm with minimal wind, which helped our analysis team understand the probable trajectory of any floating objects. The forensic team also collected water samples and examined the sandy beach area for footprints or other physical evidence. Unfortunately, the popular beach location meant that numerous footprints from other visitors had already contaminated much of the potential evidence. DNA analysis of the pacifier confirmed it belonged to Emma, but provided no additional clues about what had happened to her or her brother. David Morrison's behavior during the initial hours of the search raised some questions among the investigating team, though grief and shock could explain his somewhat detached demeanor. While Jessica was visibly distraught and actively participating in search efforts, David seemed to withdraw into himself, standing quietly by the shoreline and staring out at the water. When questioned about his activities that morning, he provided clear answers, but seemed emotionally disconnected from the situation. His explanation for being down the beach taking photographs checked out when we examined his phone, which contained several scenic shots time-stamped around the time of the disappearance. However, none of the photos captured the area where the children had been playing, which struck some team members as unusual for a father documenting a family vacation. David's professional background in engineering led him to ask detailed technical questions about the search operation and lake conditions, behavior that could be interpreted as either helpful, analytical thinking or suspicious deflection. His colleagues later described him as a methodical person who processed stress by focusing on facts and data rather than emotions. The resort where the Morrison family had been staying provided security footage that helped establish their movements prior to arriving at Emerald Bay that morning. The video showed the family leaving their cabin at approximately 8:30, with both children appearing happy and energetic as they loaded their beach equipment into their rental car. Hotel staff members who had interacted with the family during their stay described them as a normal, loving family who seemed to be enjoying their vacation. The children had been seen playing in the resort's pool area the previous evening, always under close supervision from their parents. Resort management provided guest registration information and confirmed that the Morrisons had stayed at the same property during previous visits to Lake Tahoe. The family's reservation had been made several months in advance, indicating this was a planned vacation rather than a spontaneous trip. Other guests at the resort reported seeing the family at breakfast that morning, with the children behaving normally and showing no signs of distress or illness. Witness interviews from other beachgoers present at Emerald Bay that morning provided a timeline of events, but no clear explanation for what had happened to the twins. An elderly couple who had been setting up their chairs about 40 yards from the Morrison family reported seeing the children playing happily in the sand around 9:15. A jogger who had passed by the area remembered noticing the family because the twins had been building an elaborate sand castle together, which had caught his attention because of their young age. However, none of the witnesses reported seeing the moment when the children disappeared or observing any suspicious individuals in the area. The beach had been relatively quiet that morning, with most visitors being families with young children or older couples seeking a peaceful lakeside experience. A teenage lifeguard from a nearby private beach reported that water conditions had been ideal throughout the morning, with calm surfaces and minimal current activity. The absence of any eyewitness accounts of the actual disappearance made our investigation significantly more challenging. The search operation expanded throughout the first day to include underwater sonar equipment and specialized teams trained in child recovery operations. Lake Tahoe's unique characteristics presented both advantages and challenges for search teams trying to locate missing persons. The water's exceptional clarity allowed divers to see much further than in typical lake environments, but the lake's enormous depth and size meant that search areas were vast and potentially dangerous. Specialized boat crews used sonar equipment to scan the lake bottom in expanding grid patterns from the point where the children were last seen. The single pacifier's discovery location was used as a reference point for calculating drift patterns and potential search zones. Professional dive teams from multiple agencies worked in rotating shifts to cover as much underwater area as possible during the critical first hours of the search. Mountain rescue teams also searched the heavily forested areas surrounding Emerald Bay in case the children had somehow wandered away from the beach unnoticed. Every trail, cabin, and potential hiding spot within a reasonable walking distance was thoroughly investigated by volunteers and professional search teams. As the first day of searching drew to a close, without finding any trace of Emma and Ethan Morrison, the investigation began to shift toward examining other possibilities beyond a simple accident or drowning scenario. The complete absence of any additional evidence or witness sightings suggested that whatever had happened to the twins had occurred quickly and quietly. Detective Rodriguez, my experienced partner, began reviewing similar cases from other jurisdictions to look for patterns or investigative approaches that might be relevant to our situation. The statistical reality was that cases involving missing toddlers at bodies of water typically resulted in recovery within the first few hours, making the twins' complete disappearance increasingly unusual and concerning. Local media had begun covering the story, which brought additional volunteers to assist in search efforts, but also attracted attention that could potentially complicate the investigation. The FBI was consulted about the possibility of an abduction, given the unusual circumstances and the fact that no bodies had been recovered despite extensive search efforts. Child Protection Services also became involved to ensure that proper protocols were followed and that all possibilities were being thoroughly investigated. The Morrison family's background check revealed no red flags or concerning issues that might explain the children's disappearance, though we continued our investigation into all aspects of their lives. Both parents had clean records with no history of domestic issues, child welfare concerns, or financial problems that might create stress or desperate situations. Jessica's nursing background included pediatric experience, and colleagues described her as a dedicated professional who was devoted to her children. David's employment history showed steady career advancement in the engineering field, with no periods of unexplained absence or concerning behavioral changes. The family's financial records indicated they were comfortable, but not wealthy, with no unusual transactions or suspicious activity in the months leading up to their vacation. Extended family members and close friends uniformly described the Morrisons as loving parents who were deeply committed to their children's welfare and development. Social media posts from both parents showed typical family activities and celebrations, with numerous photos and comments reflecting their joy in parenthood. Pediatric records confirmed that both children were healthy and developing normally, with no medical conditions or special needs that might explain their disappearance. The second day of searching brought additional resources and specialized equipment, including helicopters with thermal imaging capabilities and boats equipped with side-scan sonar systems. Weather conditions remained favorable for search operations, with clear skies and minimal wind that allowed aircraft to operate effectively throughout the daylight hours. The thermal imaging revealed several objects on the lake bottom that required investigation by dive teams, though none proved to be related to the missing children. Expanded ground searches covered hiking trails and camping areas within a 5-mile radius of Emerald Bay. Based on the theoretical maximum distance, 2 18-month-old children could have traveled on foot. Local businesses and residents were canvassed for any information about suspicious vehicles or individuals who might have been in the area around the time of the disappearance. The media coverage had generated numerous tips from the public, though most proved to be well-meaning but irrelevant sightings or suggestions. A few tips required follow-up investigation, including reports of a suspicious van seen in the area and claims of unusual activity at remote cabins in the surrounding mountains. The emotional toll on the search teams was evident as the hours passed without any significant discoveries or breakthroughs in the case. Jessica Morrison's emotional state continued to deteriorate as the search extended into its second day without any sign of her children. She required medical attention for dehydration and exhaustion, having refused to leave the search area except for brief periods of rest. Her parents had driven up from San Francisco to provide support and help coordinate with extended family members who were beginning to arrive in the area. The psychological trauma of losing both children simultaneously in such mysterious circumstances was evident in her behavior, which alternated between frantic energy and complete emotional shutdown. David continued his more reserved approach to dealing with the crisis, focusing on logistical aspects of the search and maintaining communication with law enforcement officials. The difference in their coping mechanisms created some tension between them, though family members attributed this to individual processing styles rather than any underlying marital problems. Child psychologists working with the investigation team noted that the parents' reactions appeared consistent with genuine grief and shock rather than deception or guilty knowledge. However, they also emphasized the importance of continued observation and support as the investigation progressed. The forensic examination of the Morrison family's rental car and personal belongings provided additional pieces of information, but no clear answers about what had happened to the twins. The vehicle showed normal wear patterns consistent with a family vacation, with car seats properly installed and children's items scattered throughout the back seat area. Sand samples from the car matched those found at Emerald Bay, confirming the family's presence at the beach location. However, analysis of the car's interior revealed no signs of struggle or unusual activity that might indicate the children had been transported against their will. The family's beach bag contained typical items for a day at the lake, including extra clothes, snacks, and toys, with nothing unusual or suspicious among the contents. Digital analysis of the parents' phones revealed normal communication patterns with friends and family leading up to the vacation, with no indications of stress, threats, or unusual circumstances. GPS data from both phones confirmed their stated timeline and locations throughout their stay at Lake Tahoe. The absence of any concerning evidence in their personal effects supported their claims of innocence, but left investigators without clear direction for the ongoing investigation. The involvement of federal authorities brought additional expertise and resources to the case, as the possibility of interstate transportation of missing children fell under federal jurisdiction. FBI agents specialized in child abduction cases reviewed all evidence and witness statements, bringing fresh perspectives to the investigation. Their analysis of the crime scene and circumstances suggested that if an abduction had occurred, it would have required careful planning and knowledge of the family's routines and location. The remote location of Emerald Bay made it an unusual choice for a random, opportunistic crime, leading investigators to consider whether the Morrison family might have been specifically targeted. Background investigations expanded to include anyone who might have had access to information about their vacation plans, including co-workers, neighbors, and service providers. The FBI also coordinated with international agencies to monitor for any potential leads involving child trafficking or illegal adoption networks. Advanced data analysis techniques were applied to communication records and financial transactions to identify any patterns or connections that might not have been apparent in the initial investigation. The federal resources significantly expanded the scope and sophistication of the search for Emma and Ethan Morrison. Local community response to the twins' disappearance demonstrated the tight-knit nature of the Lake Tahoe region, with residents and business owners contributing time, resources, and expertise to the search efforts. Boat owners volunteered their vessels and local knowledge to assist professional search teams in covering areas that might be difficult to access otherwise. Mountain rescue volunteers with intimate knowledge of the terrain provided invaluable assistance in ground searches of remote areas surrounding the lake. Local hotels and restaurants provided food and lodging for out-of-town family members and additional search personnel. The tourism industry, while concerned about negative publicity, remained supportive of investigation efforts and provided full cooperation with law enforcement requests. Social media campaigns organized by community members helped spread awareness beyond the immediate area, generating tips and offers of assistance from across the country. Prayer vigils and community gatherings provided emotional support for the Morrison family and demonstrated the region's commitment to finding the missing children. The collaborative response reinforced the determination to leave no stone unturned in the search for Emma and Ethan. As the investigation entered its third day, the focus began to shift toward longer-term missing persons protocols while maintaining active search operations in the immediate area. Statistical analysis of similar cases suggested that if the children were not found within the first 72 hours, the nature of the investigation would need to evolve to consider alternative scenarios and expanded geographical search areas. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children became involved, providing specialized resources and expertise in cases involving missing toddlers. Their database of similar cases and behavioral analysis capabilities offered new avenues for investigation that complemented the ongoing physical search efforts. Psychological profiles of potential perpetrators were developed based on the specific circumstances of the twins' disappearance, helping to guide investigative priorities and resource allocation. The case began to attract national media attention, which brought additional visibility, but also required careful management to protect the integrity of the ongoing investigation. Law enforcement officials worked with media relations specialists to provide appropriate public updates, while maintaining operational security for sensitive aspects of the case. The search area continued to expand, based on new theories about what might have happened to Emma and Ethan Morrison during those critical moments when they vanished from Emerald Bay. Water current analysis suggested that if the children had somehow entered the lake, their bodies might have traveled significant distances from the original location before settling on the lake bottom. Specialized underwater search teams from the Navy were brought in to assist with deep water recovery operations in areas where standard search techniques had proven inadequate. Ground search teams extended their coverage to include remote camping areas and abandoned structures that might serve as hiding places or disposal sites. The possibility that the children had been transported by vehicle to distant locations prompted coordination with law enforcement agencies throughout California and Nevada. Highway patrol officers were briefed on the case and provided with detailed descriptions and photographs to assist with roadside checkpoints and traffic stops. The investigation had evolved from a local missing persons case into a multi-state operation involving dozens of agencies and hundreds of personnel committed to finding the truth about what happened to the Morrison twins. The emotional and psychological impact on the Morrison family intensified as days passed without any significant developments in the case. Jessica required ongoing medical and psychological support as the reality of her children's disappearance began to settle in, while David struggled with feelings of helplessness and guilt about not being closer to the children when they vanished. Extended family members took turns providing support and managing practical concerns like communication with employers, financial obligations, and media requests. The couple's marriage faced tremendous strain as they dealt with grief, uncertainty, and the intense scrutiny that accompanied a high-profile missing persons case. Child psychologists noted that the loss of both children simultaneously created unique challenges for the healing process, as parents typically found comfort in caring for surviving siblings during such tragedies. The absence of closure or definitive answers about what happened to Emma and Ethan made it impossible for the family to begin any form of normal grieving process. Support groups for families of missing children provided some assistance, though the specific circumstances of their case made it difficult to find others who had experienced similar situations. The investigation team faced mounting pressure to produce results as media attention increased and public interest in the case continued to grow. Every lead was thoroughly investigated, from credible tips about suspicious individuals to psychic predictions and conspiracy theories that emerged on social media platforms. The challenge of managing public expectations while conducting a thorough professional investigation required careful balance and clear communication strategies. Investigators worked around the clock to process evidence, interview witnesses, and coordinate search operations across an increasingly large geographical area. The case had consumed enormous resources from multiple agencies, though everyone involved remained committed to finding answers about what happened to the Morrison twins. Regular briefings with agency leadership and elected officials ensured that adequate resources continued to be allocated to the investigation despite budget concerns and competing priorities. The dedication of search and rescue volunteers who continued to assist despite the physical and emotional toll demonstrated the community's unwavering commitment to bringing Emma and Ethan home safely. As I reflect on the Morrison twins case, it serves as a reminder of how quickly life can change and how many questions can remain unanswered despite exhaustive investigation efforts. The single pacifier floating in Lake Tahoe's pristine waters became a symbol of innocence lost and families forever changed by circumstances beyond their control. The case challenged our understanding of how two small children could simply vanish without a trace from a location where they were under parental supervision. Every member of the investigation team was deeply affected by the search for Emma and Ethan, knowing that somewhere out there answers existed about what had happened during those critical moments at Emerald Bay. The community's response demonstrated the power of human compassion and the determination to protect the most vulnerable members of society. While the immediate search operations eventually scaled back, the case remained open and active, with investigators committed to following every lead and pursuing every possibility until the Morrison family found the answers and closure they desperately needed.